He spent 60 years studying the nature of death, not morbidly, not with fear, but with the specific, scholarly, completely Buddhist conviction that death is not the end of the story, and that understanding it clearly is one of the most important things a human being can do with their time. Robert A.F. Thurman died peacefully at his home in Bearsville, near Woodstock, New York on Tuesday, June 16, 2026. He was 84 years old. And the warning signs that he was approaching the end, the ones visible to anyone who had been following his work in recent years, were not hidden. They were woven into every teaching he gave, every podcast episode, every Substack post, every live session, because a man who has spent 60 years translating Buddhist philosophy on the nature of impermanence does not need to announce that he knows his time is finite. He just keeps teaching until the morning he cannot. Let's start with the most recent public appearances, because Robert Thurman did not go quiet in his final years. He went deeper. His Substack and podcast remained active well into 2026. The titles of his final episodes tell the story better than any press release ever could. The world is upside down, but don't lose heart. A Christmas message, expansive, imperfect, and offered in love. The Christ, the Buddha, and the rise of the sacred feminine. Buddhas have more fun. Buddhas have more fun. That was the title of one of his last recorded teachings. From a man who had lost the use of one eye in a Harvard accident at 20 years old, who had been ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist monk, who had built a cultural institution and a Columbia University professorship and an online teaching platform, all before breakfast, most days. He was still making jokes, still finding joy in the teaching, right up to the end. But the physical warning signs were there for anyone paying close attention. In his final months, Robert Thurman had stepped back from the more demanding public engagements that had defined his earlier years. The international travel had slowed. The in-person events at Tibet House had reduced. The teaching was increasingly happening through the screen, through the Substack, through the podcast, through the live sessions that his community could access from wherever they were. That shift from the stage to the screen, from the room to the recording, is one of the most consistent patterns in the final chapter of a public intellectual's life. It is the body saying, I can still give. I just cannot go as far to give it. And Robert Thurman kept giving. In January 2026, just 5 months before his death, he was still live streaming, still answering questions, still translating the most complex ideas in Tibetan Buddhist philosophy into language that a person in Ohio or Scotland or Singapore could receive and actually use. That is not the behavior of a man who had given up. That is the behavior of a man who understood, in the most Buddhist possible way, that every moment of teaching available to him was a gift, and that the correct response to a gift is to give it. Tibet House U.S. announced his death with the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum, the jewel in the lotus. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the mantra associated with compassion, with the bodhisattva of compassion, with the aspiration to remain present and available to beings until all suffering ends. He spent his entire life aspiring to exactly that, to remain present, to remain available, to keep translating the wisdom that he had been given by the Dalai Lama, by the Tibetan tradition, by the accident that cost him his eye and sent him searching until the very last morning. He met Prime Minister Modi in 2023. He received the Padma Shri, one of India's highest civilian honors. He built Tibet House in New York with the Dalai Lama and Richard Gere. He taught at Columbia for decades. He was widely described as the first Westerner ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist monk by the Dalai Lama himself. And then, on a Tuesday morning in June, he died peacefully at his residence in Bearsville. In the Hudson Valley he had called home, near the Menla retreat he helped build, surrounded, presumably, by the silence that his 60 years of practice had taught him to inhabit completely. He spent his entire career preparing people for the reality of impermanence. He spent his final years demonstrating it, With every podcast title, every live session, every gentle stepping back from the demands of a public life that was always, at its core, a life of service. He knew it was coming. He always did. He just kept teaching anyway. Robert A.F. Thurman, born August 3, 1941, died June 16, 2026, aged 84. Om Mani Padme Hum. Thank you for watching.